Hi, I'm Daniel Roberts, and you are listening to the Giving Town podcast, where we share stories of hope and generosity in our wonderful community of Newburgh, Oregon, and the surrounding area. This podcast is sponsored by my real estate team, the Joyful Roberts Group, and we are licensed real estate brokers with Premier Property Group, LLC. We're passionate about serving our clients well and educating people about the many aspects of real estate. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check out our YouTube channel, which is linked in the description below. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Alan Evans, founder and CEO of Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. Helping Hands is an organization that uses a trauma-informed, data-driven model to help put people coming off the streets on a path towards self-sufficiency. And we'll get into what that means during today's conversation. We'll also be talking about Alan's personal story, why this work is meaningful to him, how the process works, and how this model has a key role in addressing the homeless crisis. So I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. Well, thank you, Alan, so much for joining me on this episode. I'm looking forward to learning more about Helping Hands and getting the word out about what you guys do. So before we jump into Helping Hands itself and how that whole program works, I would love to have a little background of you and your life so that people can kind of get an idea of why this work's important to you.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Alan Evans, and I am the founder and CEO of Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. We're a homeless reentry program that serves 5 Oregon counties: Plaza, Yamhill County, Tillamook County, Lincoln County, and Multnomah County.
And so for you, your background, and I'll kind of let you get into of how this work became important. But what was it like? What was your childhood like? What was it like growing up in
Well, I was born into an addicted, violent family. I was born in California. My father was an extremely violent man. I lived through a bunch of sexual abuse as a child by family members. Physical abuse by my father. I was put in the hospital multiple times. I was hung by my father when I was 11 years old. I was found by a neighbor, and I was put into the foster care system in California. My mom and my little brother Wayne escaped that violent situation, and I ended up in a boys' home for troubled kids. And as you can imagine, I was angry, I was frustrated, I was confused. I didn't understand why I wasn't loved. I didn't understand why I wasn't saved. Believing in God was something that just didn't happen, because only the questions I had most of my life: if there was this loving God, why did these things happen to me? And I was put into a boys' home in Inyokern, California, and we would always go down to this little pool hall down the street. They'd take all those kids down there and let us run around these big open room, and there was this room with multiple doors around it, and all of us kids would be in there playing, and this woman used to come out. She'd have this little piece of paper with a paragraph on it. She'd say, "If you memorize this, I'll give you 50 cents. And I remember taking that little piece of paper back to the house that night and memorizing it word for word, and I said it to her the next day, and she gave me my 50 cents. I still remember what I bought. I bought a Chico stick, an Abba, some grape bubble gum. And needless to say, I was in that home for just about a year. I started running away at a very young age. Started drug abuse at a very, very young age. In a weird sort of way, when I was using drugs, I didn't feel all of the emotions of where I came from and what I lived through. So there was a time that drug abuse actually saved my life, before it ended up almost killing me multiple times in my life. I started running away at a very young age. I was a full-blown methamphetamine addict by the time I was 13 years old. I lived in dugouts of elementary schools and cars. I was homeless all over the United States. I started running away. By the time I was 15 years old, I started going from Victorville, California to Phoenix, Arizona to Las Cruces, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas, San Antonio, Louisiana, Pensacola, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, up to New York, And I spent the next 27 years chronically homeless, addicted, messed up and angry, because every time I'd go get help someplace, they would always tell me what they thought I needed. You know, if you just quit using drugs, your life will change. And I needed so much more than that because I was broken internally. The trauma that I lived through wasn't recognizable because of the situation I was always in. People always seen the product of my environment after I already was messing up. They didn't ever see what I truly need. And just over 20 years ago, about 21 years ago now, I ended up homeless in Portland, Oregon, where I slept under the Burnside Bridge for about 4.5 months. I had the second coldest day I ever experienced in my life. I nearly froze to death. And me and two other guys ended up deciding that we're going to leave there because if you're going to be homeless in Oregon, you might as well be homeless on the beach. And so we ended up in Seaside, Oregon. 3 of us did. We split up. Everybody kind of went their own way once we reached the coast. And I remember it was the day after Christmas, a little over 20 and a half years ago. And I was huddled up in these bushes in Gerhardt, Oregon, just off the highway. I had a brown tarp and I was freezing and I was sick. I was dope sick. And these people came out to their mailbox to get their mail. And I noticed they had a bunch of bags in their minivan. And I hear them arguing. I was kind of huddled in the bushes about who was going to keep an eye on their mail while they were gone. And so I sat there for a few minutes and I realized these people were leaving town. And I look behind me through the bushes and I see this big, beautiful home sitting there kind of all by itself. And I decided to go break in that house. I stayed in the bushes about another 2 hours. I went back behind the house and I kicked the door into the garage. And I started rummaging through everything I could rummage through to see what it is I could steal and I could sell and I could get high. And I found a .22 pistol in the glove box of a Toyota pickup truck. And I remember looking at this gun. I had 2 bullets in it. And I grabbed a 5-gallon bucket. I set it upside down on the pavement in the garage. And in between the garage and the house, there was a little room that had a washer and dryer in it. I had a telephone hanging on the wall. And I grabbed that telephone and I came back. I sat down on the bucket. I remember looking at this telephone, realizing that I'm 37 years old and I've got nobody to call. At every person that ever crossed paths with me, I never let close enough to ever help me. And so I got in my mouth and everything in me wanted to die. Everything did. I wasn't a believer. Everything in me wanted to die. And I still remember the string of spit from my mouth to the barrel of the gun. And because I pulled it out, I was trying so hard. I didn't know even who to call. I didn't want to call 911. And all of a sudden, I remember this little piece of paper that this woman gave me when I was 11 years old in that boy's home. And the paragraph stated, "For God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten Son, whosoever shall believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." And for the first time in my life, I got down on my knees and I said, "I don't know if you're real, but I don't want to live this way no more." It stopped me from killing myself that night. I slept on the floor of that garage. The next morning I woke up. I walked from Gerhardt, Oregon to Astoria, and I went to every door I could find. Said, "Look, I'm broke, I'm homeless, I'm addicted. I don't want to live this way no more. Please help me." I tried to get food stamps. They told me you needed identification. I tried to get identification. They told me you needed a residence. I wanted a residence, but I had no money. And at that particular moment, I realized that crime was a win-win situation. That I could commit a crime and continue living the lifestyle I was living. But if I got arrested, I'd get 3 meals and a bed in jail. That getting arrested became getting arrested. And that's what my story was. I walked all the way back to that house in Gerhardt. I kicked the door between the garage and the house open. I rummaged through everything I possibly could. And I found these checks next to this computer because these people own this driving ranch that they were running on there. I had a broken down Social Security card. And I put a check in their computer. I wrote it out to Alan Evans. I printed it out backwards. As a matter of fact, on this paper, cut it out with a pair of scissors. I signed my name in the bottom of it. And I took that check and my broken down Social Security card to Safeway in Seaside and handed it over the counter. And I'll never forget the look on a bank teller's face. She looked at me and she goes, "Really?" And I said, "Really?" Call. So she called the police. And I got arrested that day. And I got taken to the Seaside Police Department. And this police officer looks across this table at me and he says, "Tell me your story." So from beginning to end, I told him about my story, about the abuse, about all of the stuff. And he looked at me and said, "You know what? You're not a bad guy. You're just broken." He was a believer. And he made a phone call. And he got me into a small home in Seaside, a little tiny recovery home in Seaside. Had probably 10 beds in it. It was full. And gave me a corner of a living room where I put my little sleeping bag together. Started going to meetings. I started to change my life. And I got a job. I got on my feet. I got a driver's license. I bought a pickup truck. And 7 months later, I saved up about $40 in my bank account. I went back to that police officer and said, "I got an idea. I want to start an organization that helps people. A place where people will walk in the door and we hear them and we hear their story." And I said, "Okay." So me and 4 police officers, 3 recovering drug addicts, and a recovering alcoholic, got our nonprofit status, started an organization, opened up a small home in Seaside, Oregon, with 8 men in it. And it was pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, my story ended up making headlines. And news coverage came in and they covered my story. And then my story ended up going national, about what I lived through, what happened, and starting this small organization. Then I got a call from some people in Yamhill County who asked if I would be willing to bring our program. We concentrated mostly in those days on offender reentry. As a matter of fact, we opened the doors to this. We opened a tiny clubhouse with a house right next to it. And in 30 days, it was full. People wanted to change their life. And they just started showing up at our doors. And so a group of people asked if I'd be willing to come to Yamhill County. And so me and 2 guys came to Yamhill County. We acted like we had nowhere to go. We knocked on all the doors, and the story was the same in that community as well. That you can only receive one service if you go to a door. You can receive food, you can receive shelter, you can receive addiction services, you can go to jail, but we never truly treat the core issues that people face to change their life.
And how long ago was that you came to Yamhill County?
17 years ago. We've been providing services for 17 years in Yamhill County.
Okay. Yeah. So when I'm just kind of thinking about your story, in a lot of ways you were, whether you call it lucky or blessed or whatever, that you had someone who did listen to your story. You didn't have to go through the prison system. You didn't have to.
I did go through the prison system.
Oh, so you did? Not
at that time. I spent prison time in 2 different states. My addiction took me, where they just released me. And with $200, I gave money and said, "Good luck, kid. Show up at your PO's office," Okay. Even the prison system didn't help. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of my thoughts is when someone goes through prison, and I was actually having a conversation with someone else just today who a close friend of theirs is going through the prison system, but you make a mistake one way or another, or however your life turns out that you're getting involved in some level of crime. It's not like anyone wakes up and just says, "You know what, I'm just gonna go do something to hurt someone." Like there's a history there. There's reasons that people do what they do. But then I was just kind of wondering it, and I asked this question, and I would kind of ask the question to you as well. Like, what is the purpose of prison?
Well, I think, if you look back on the history of the prison system in the United States, it stems from basic law that says do the next right thing, and if you do not do the next right thing, there's a consequence for your actions.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we don't understand is that trauma is what drives all bad decisions.
Yeah.
It's usually something that you live through or a situation. So the prison system was put in place for a very good reason, is because if you cross a line, you have a consequence. You have a consequence and you don't follow that consequence and it means nothing to you, then you have another consequence. Then you can have another consequence. In most cases, they don't throw people in prison for doing something minuscule. They give a warning as they go probation. They try everything they can before they send somebody to a penitentiary.
Yeah.
For the most part. But it was put together for a particular reason. I think where we're lacking is there needs to be more education opportunities while a person is in the penitentiary, to give them the best opportunity, because even when they get out of jail, you're left with one more obstacle, and that's recovering from the decisions you made in your past. And you'll always be judged from that going into the future. One of the reasons when we came to Yamhill County, offender reentry was what we worked on mostly, right? Because 20 years ago, 18 years ago, the streets were full of guys that were addicted, had mental health issues, dual diagnosed, lived through a ton of trauma. And in those days, you could get evicted from an apartment, go down the street, get another apartment. That's how plentiful housing was. We watched the face of homelessness change in 2009 and 2010. We had a crash in the market, and all of a sudden, affordable housing became more expensive than what people were making. And they started to see this gap in the center of it. And while offender reentry was, we based our program off of, if you came in our door, I would say, hey, I'm going to fight for you, but you have to fight for you. You stay clean and sober, you get a job, you pay a little bit of space for your bed, and we're going to assist you. You do those things, we'll be on the same team. And people would come in 6 months, man, they'd get on their feet, they'd get an apartment, and then 6 months later, they show back up at our door needing help. Yeah, which was funny. Because, they needed so much more than just the basics to get to a place to become successful. Yeah. And I'll tell you a little story. In 2009, mothers with children started showing up at our doors. They'd never done drugs in their life. And senior citizens started to show up at our doors. And a lot of people in Newburgh know the story about the original organization that I started 20 years ago. It was called Thugs Off Drugs. Mm-hmm. It was basically all offender reentry, working with knuckleheads. And in 2009, we started to see the face change of people coming to our door. And then they didn't feel comfortable being in our facilities because they weren't drug addicts and they weren't troublemakers. They were moms with kids. And just about that time, I was trying to become a foster parent in the state of Oregon because I wanted to foster kids who lived through the same stuff I lived through. And I became the first foster parent in the state of Oregon with a criminal history. I became the first adopted parent in the state of Oregon with a history of homelessness. And I adopted a boy named Eli. Eli, he was in the third grade when I got him. He never went to school a day in his life. He grew up in a tent on the streets. And finally, at the very end, he got taken away from his mom. And he had some ties to our organization. And when Eli came to me, he didn't know how to read and he didn't know how to write. I didn't know what to do. So I took him to Gear Elementary School. And they did what they call an INEP, an individual education plan. You see, they evaluated the obstacles that Eli faced to read and write at grade level. And sitting around this table was a person that could help him read, a person that could help him write, a person that could help him with mental health issues, a tutor, a counselor. There were 7 people sitting around this table. And I had this epiphany. if Eli would have had to go down the street to learn to read, then down the street to learn to write, down the street to get help with mental health issues, down the street to see a counselor, if he had to go to multiple places to get help he needed to be at grade level, this kid never would have made it. By the way, he graduated 5 years ago. He's buying a home. He's a good kid. But this concept that they brought all of the services to Eli is what stuck to me. And I said, this is exactly what we need to do with our homeless population. Why should a person have to go to multiple places to overcome the obstacles they face to reenter society? Why can't we start a program that will bring the services to the person? We went back to the drawing board. We learned some valuable lessons. One is if you're an ex-convict and an old homeless guy, and you run an organization called Thugs Off Drugs, people do not trust you with their money. Raising money was almost impossible. Right? Yeah. But the bigger picture was, what if we did an evaluation of the obstacles a person faces when they come through our door, and then set up individual reentry plans, an IRP similar to an IEP, and truly give people the opportunity to be heard, do ACEs surveys on people so we learn about their trauma and their life, and then customize reentry plans for people so they can overcome the obstacles they face to become successful in a community. And that's what we started doing, and it changed from there.
And so when did the name change to Helping Hands?
Well, the name changed to Helping Hands in 2011. Okay. Is when we decided that, we're not meeting the needs of all the people if we're only concentrating on people with certain obstacles like addiction and prison. It's so much more than that. That's why we just opened up a new facility in Portland at the old Wapato jail called Ivy Lake Soul Center. We got a 155,000 square foot building. We put 318 beds in there. It's got full medical facilities, vocational training, all of the stuff in one location. And now we're rebranding all of our organizations in each one of the communities into Hope Centers. And we're doing this new model. We've got our own proprietary database. Every single person who comes through our door, we do a full evaluation of their demographics, their needs, and the obstacles they face to reenter society, and individualizing reentry plans for each person, giving the best chance for sustainability of the community we possibly can.
So who are the people that you typically serve the most? I mean, it sounds like there's quite a wide range, right? But if someone, who are the people who would be eligible for this?
Well, everybody. I mean, the only population we don't serve is a sex offender, because we provide services to families. Mm-hmm. And, it's just that one population that we're incapable of serving because it's the difficult population to serve because of their circumstances. But, the fastest growing population of homeless right now are senior citizens. People don't realize that. The second fastest population is mothers with children. We've always got a growing population of single males with a history of drug abuse. About 56% of people come through our door now have addiction issues, and 40% have a criminal history. That number used to be in the 80 and 90% range 17 years ago, but it's a lot different now. And our system is we set our communities up to fail when it comes to homelessness. We truly do, because we've adopted this housing first concept that they believe is important. But all it does is invest in people to stay exactly where they're at. And I'm proof of that. I mean, I know I've lived on both sides of this thing, so I bring a different perspective to the table.
Yeah. So when someone comes through your door, and you mentioned you have this IRP, but what can they typically expect? What does the process look like?
Well, the process first is the evaluation, right? I mean, we want to accomplish small goals at first, the basic necessities. So when I say needs, we talk about making sure people got access to healthcare, make sure they got access to food stamps, making sure they've got identification, a social security card, the basic things they need to be employed, the things that make everything roll. That's the most important piece that we can accomplish right off the bat. And there are small little goals that will allow us to assist a person to get to those places so they can start a foundation to look at the employment opportunities, make sure that they're getting treatment for their drug or alcohol abuse, plugged into 12-step recovery meetings, counseling if they've got mental health issues, making sure that they can get evaluations of those things. So you can start to build a bigger foundation. So everybody's story is different. Some people come in our door, they only need 30 days to get back on their feet. Some people come in, they need over a year, sometimes 2 years, especially our senior population. You know, they're out there on a fixed income, and the housing market is much more than they make currently. They can't get employed and get back into the workforce to bridge that gap. So everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
But the truth is if we look at this in a format of usable data, we can get a screenshot of the basic things that we've learned over the last 20 years of doing our job, of what's going to help a person become more successful, but become sustainable. We have to show compassion and understanding, but accountability at the same time. When you put compassion and accountability together, people believe that they're invested in. They believe that they're worth it. And when you can give a person purpose, success works out pretty good.
Yeah. So how does that process go? Because there's so many people who need this kind of help. I know there's kind of limited resources, right? So, you know, these people who may need a lot of help for a long period of time, how do you navigate that, or you just kind of stick with them until they're...
Well, we house them. Okay. And, you know, everybody has their own individual reentry plan. And so our goal is to, you know, I mean, our housing programs are not just a place to come in and eat cereal and expect everything to be handed to you. You know, everybody who comes to our door agrees up front that this is a program. This is an opportunity. And we do this wonderful handshake that says, we're here, but you've got to be there. As soon as you stop fighting for you, we have to stop fighting for you. Then what we offer and what you need aren't the same thing. Yeah. You know, and we're full. We're always full. You know, we believe that this best practice model for homeless reentry is kind of what's working. I mean, that's why we've expanded into multiple counties. We're getting calls from all over the United States for our data model with the services attached to it. Is when we're driven by data, and we kind of know what the needs are in people, and we can accomplish stuff when we know what we're talking about. Yeah. And we believe that this is an answer to make things happen.
And what you guys are doing is really quite different and more involved. Like what you said, it's not just housing first. It's housing, but it's also meeting the other needs that are really needed to solve the core issues, right? So
that's right. It's compassion and accountability, and it's driven by data. You know, I mean, when our organization is data-driven, trauma-informed, and person-centered, we are not attempting to solve a problem by saying, okay, people are houseless, let's just give them housing. Because the truth is, if you put an ill person into well housing, you end up with ill housing. And I don't mean that the wrong way. It's a concept, right? There was a time in my life, if you would have put me into an apartment, that apartment, I never would have been successful in that apartment. Matter of fact, I was put in apartments multiple times in my homeless career. And I was never successful because I did not have the tools to sustain that kind of housing.
So what is your biggest hope that this could do, or that could turn into? Like what is your vision for 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
Well, I think, we're really working on a data service model expansion. And we're, in multiple states right now. The concept of being driven by data and truly letting people know that we care about that. And there's an opportunity. We want to see communities invest in the wellness of our communities by investing in people to change their life. Because people want it. I lived on the streets for 27 years, Daniel,
Yeah.
and I never met one person who woke up in the morning and said, you know what? I want to be homeless today. I want to be addicted today. I want mental health issues in my life. People don't wake up wanting that. Our community believes that people want to stay exactly where they're at. And that's not the truth, not even close to the truth.
And I mean, it's getting harder too with the gap between what people earn and what houses cost. And even more recently with rising interest rates, it's getting a lot harder and harder for people to either continue to afford the rent as it goes up or to ever afford a home.
Yeah, that gap, you're absolutely right.
What role do you see helping hands in this in this place? Because for me, it being in real estate and seeing, okay, wow, less and less people can afford the median home, and I have concerns about the rate of homelessness really increasing. And I know that's kind of out of what you can control, is outside of what any of us can control. But do you have thoughts or hopes of what can be done other than more and more people just needing?
Well, no, I think the more data we can collect in that situation, the better off we're going to be to learn. We're doing it backwards in communities right now, and I believe that with all my heart. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year in the state of Oregon to solve a problem that gets 15% worse a year in chronic homelessness. I mean, think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
We are continually doing, and then each year we increase the emergency, which increases the dollars in the communities. And it continually gets worse. It's this definition of insanity. We continue to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And it's not happening. We need to collect data and information a certain way. True data-driven opportunities. And organizations need to work together hand in hand. Right now, all organizations are competing for the same pots of money.
Yeah.
And they're not working together closely because they're competing with other people to get these same pots of money, which is terrible for a population that we're trying to help.
Yeah.
We need to change things in communities. Our hope is that we can bring enough data to the table to get our communities to realize that it's not what they think. And there's opportunities for help.
So what does that look like to get to that point?
Well, I think, we've got to bring the data to the table, right? We're doing that now. I mean, people never understood we would have 34% of the people who come through our door are diagnosed with a mental illness, and less than 4% of those people are being treated in communities. Think about that for a minute, because it's in excess. The 56% of the people come through our door with addiction issues, and the average number of time they've been in treatment is 7. The average number of time it's treated, they've been a 7. And why that doesn't work? Because if you put a person into services for addiction, I've been in treatment 13 times, by the way, and they released me to the same environment I lived in before I went to treatment. These pieces that aren't working, we have to look at the agencies who run those organizations, and how can we all be accountable together as a community to make sure people don't fall out of the system? We have to look at this thing from the bottom up and stop looking at it from the top down. And that's how we're going to generate change in the community. So once we have that kind of information, we can promote long-lasting change. But we have to get to that point where everybody's willing to sit at the table and listen together.
Yeah. And it sounds like, and I've heard many people say fairly similar things to that. But what do you think it actually takes to go from talking about what could happen to actually getting those people at the table and making those decisions and beginning to be led by the data? Do you have hope that this is actually attainable, that we can actually do this?
Well, I do, because I believe that, you know, the biggest changes that I ever made in my life came from the toughest places I was in, right? Eventually, this is going to get to the problem, that this is going to get to the point where it's so bad that we can't do anything but change. It is going to happen without a doubt, because that's what we do, and that's how communities learn. I believe it's opportunist, and we can do it. I think we need to start listening to the people we're trying to serve, because they don't have a voice at the table. They don't. It's usually people that are leading agencies that's never been homeless or addicted a day in their life, and they want to say what they believe is best for a community. It's time that we start looking at the people and taking the data that says, we see what you need now because we have this information, and here's how we're going to provide the service better. And eventually we're all going to come to the table.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer in it. Listen, I started this organization with $40 in my pocket and an idea 20 years ago. And we've served over 11,000 people in the state of Oregon into sustainable lifestyles. If we can do that, we can do this, right?
Yeah.
And remember, when I sat in that garage on my knees, and I said, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, I don't want to live this way no more. My prayer that day was I didn't want to be there no more. And today I'm the CEO of the largest homeless reentry program in the state of Oregon. Kind of cool.
That's seems a bit much for a coincidence.
A little bit too much, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, and the main exposure that I had with you at an organization I volunteer at in Newburgh, Love Inc., most of the people that I've experienced are the people coming out of prison. So I wanted to touch on that real quick, because that's one aspect of the people that you serve. But for me, when I've thought of helping hands, I've always thought about those interactions. And I know we briefly touched on a couple things about prison, but what are some of the unique challenges that people face when they're coming out of prison, trying to get reentry? You know, they're reentering society, but what are the unique factors and challenges they face that maybe people are not aware of?
Well, I think what people don't understand, let me see how to put this. Even the person that's going through the system almost gets, and I don't mean brainwashed, but I have always believed that my problems were my addiction issues, and I committed a crime. And I had to face obstacles to come in, because I couldn't get hired in certain places because I had a criminal history. I couldn't get an apartment in certain places because I had a criminal history and I had evictions on my record. You know, the hardest climb is from the deepest holes. Mm-hmm. But people have so much more than that they need than just that basic tough climb out of the hole. That's the toughest part of going to jail or going to prison. And then when you get out, the hole's even deeper than it was before you went in. Mm-hmm. How do we allow people the opportunity to change in the places they need it the most? Because society has created more and more and more obstacles for people to have the opportunity to change their life. And I think that's what people don't understand, is that these are human beings, they're people. They want a different way of life. And we've got to offer them the opportunity for it. I think that we're lacking in that fuse.
Yeah. And that's what I've experienced too, is almost every single service, every single government agency, they say, oh, well, you have a criminal record, we can't help you.
Yeah.
And they're the ones maybe that need it the most. They realize they made a mistake. They want to change. They don't want to continue living the same. I'm just like you said, I don't want to live this way anymore. And What's another way? If they're not presented with another way, then what else is there for them to do but what they knew, commit the same, maybe commit the same crime, go back to prison, and if all I'll
Well,
say is like, well, you should have straightened yourself out. It's like, well, much easier said than done, I'm sure.
it is. It is. I think that when we've created an opportunity that failure is an option, failing is an option. And so when you're in a survival mode and you've been through stuff in your life and you've made mistakes, whatever the case is, and you get out and you go, well, the climb up this hill is this hard, but giving up is this easy. I mean, there's your choice. It is that, can I make this climb? My feet are killing me. I don't have an opportunity. Every time I make 2 steps up, somebody smacks me and I end up 2 steps behind. Isn't giving up easier? Isn't self-medicating easier? We have created this atmosphere that says, well, it's hard to explain. But I think you understand what I'm talking about is that, we've made failure an option.
I definitely do, because I think any small business owner too faces, and really anyone in life, if you're going to try something extremely hard and put all this effort in, there's a thought, well, what if I do that and I still fail? It'd be easier to just give up now or just take the easy way now if I'm going to try extremely hard and get there anyway. There's this thing I think within people that I don't want to try so hard and put everything I have into this only to fail. I'd rather just say I chose failure. That way I don't have to go.
Well, see, it's simpler. It really is. It's simpler. And because you've lived there before, then, relapse is an option. Giving up is an option. And that's terrible that we've put people in that position. I mean, listen, their own consequences. And I have several of them in my life. It took me 17 years to dig myself out of the multi-$100,000 hole that I created for myself. And I spent my whole life justifying my behavior because of what happened to me when I was a kid. I wouldn't have done this if that didn't happen to me. And everybody's got that story. Everybody does.
Yeah.
And it's a heck of a place to be when all I really wanted when I was a kid was to be safe, right? Was to have somebody fight for me. I would end up a completely different person. I'm grateful that I lived through everything I lived through to be the man I am today. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody else.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this is a question that's perhaps a bit more philosophical or theological. You said when you grew up, because a lot of people have this question, whether they're Christians or not, or whatever religion, of if there's this supposedly an amazing God, why does all this stuff happen? And it seems like you probably have an answer to that now. How do you answer that?
Well, there it is. I remember going to the Bible Baptist Church in Victorville, California, when I was a kid. I went with this kid named Stan McReynolds. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And, my parents were not believers at all. I mean, you did talk about God in my home. But I was on a weekend with this kid. And I remember going to this little Sunday school and hearing these stories about this loving God that's always there and everything else. When you live through bad stuff, you don't realize that he was always there. And I didn't understand it, and then when I started to really make some prominent changes in my life later, that I'm forgiven because of he's forsaken. I mean, I didn't understand that completely. It took me years and years to understand it. But there is this loving God, and you don't get it until you get it. And that's probably a good thing, right? I wouldn't be who I am today doing what I'm doing today if it wasn't for my understanding of that.
Yeah.
But I also read this book called Purpose Driven Life that I thought was amazing, because it doesn't matter where you're at in your journey, that you have a purpose. And, we find ourselves in this place. I get it today. I lived through everything I lived through to become the man I am today, and I'm so grateful for that. And I still see people come through the doors of our facilities who, if you brought up a concept of God, they would be angry, and it's only because they're hurt. But I've also watched them turn to me and say, "How come you feel the way you feel?" And I would tell them, "Why don't you come over here for a minute? Let me tell you my story."
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, there's some of the most prominent purveyors of change in people's hearts, and to see them go through the same thing, and there's all of a sudden realization that God is love, man. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's many people, many even that listen to this podcast, that God is either a foreign concept or a concept that, I mean, like you said, it's a cause of anger. And, it's very understandable to me. I've seen many explanations or many people who claim to be representations of God who have not done a good job of that. So I very much understand the idea of God being associated with very negative feelings, to put it simply. So it's just interesting to hear your perspective on that. And this podcast is not to try to convert anyone to anyone religion, but I appreciate you sharing.
I think that there was a moment that it began to make sense, because even when I started to believe, and even though I was told I was forgiven, I did a lot of bad stuff and decisions in my life. But every day I'd wish that I was somebody else. I wish I was better, and then I read in Romans 10, where Paul says, "Look, I want to do the right thing, but I do the wrong thing. No matter how much I want to do the right thing, I still do the wrong thing." And then the question was, is it me who does it, or is it the sin in me who does it? You see, our hearts are good, our decisions are wrong. And we find a place in that, and that kind of made that difference from my mind internally. I don't remember ever waking up wanting to be a bad person or make bad decisions when I made that. And there's a difference there. So there's a part of us that's good and whole. And that was a game changer for Alan, because I realized that I never really I don't remember my whole life, as much as I was angry at her, all the bad things that happened to me, the decisions that I made to hurt other people, and the decisions I made that were bad decisions in my life. But I never woke up wanting to be that kind of a person. Those verses in Acts or Romans, completely changed my concept on all of it, because I never truly wanted it to happen. Yeah. So that was a good place for Alan.
Well, and I appreciate the hope that you give to everyone. I think when people have hope, I think that is one of the major catalysts of change. Absolutely. There has to be some level of hope, and not seeing yourself just as a terrible person, but seeing yourself as someone who's got a chance. And I think you do that for people, and your organization does that for people, is giving hope, giving life. Like maybe there was no other glimmer of hope anywhere else. There was no other light, but you guys are that light for people. I wish I could keep talking to you for hours. I think there's a lot of great things we could talk about, but I appreciate you sharing all the things you did. And how can people get involved or learn more about you and what you do?
Well, we have a website at www.helpinghandsreentry.org. That's helpinghandsreentry.org, REENTRY.org. Come and check us out. Learn a little bit about us. We love people. We love volunteer opportunities. We're all in this together. When you figure it out, come and check us out.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. It was great hearing your story. It's great learning more about this organization, and I look forward to getting the word out a bit more and sharing the story.
Well, I appreciate you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, and I hope you are encouraged and touched by Alan's story and the work that Helping Hands is doing. We really only scratched the surface of this organization, so please check out helpinghandsreentry.org, which is linked in the description below, to learn more about their model and the work they're doing. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and share this episode with a friend who you think would enjoy it as well. Well, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next episode.